That's right. You're listening to another episode of the co-main event mixed martial arts podcast. I'm Chad Dundas. That's Ben Fulks. We're both longtime MMA journalists, and for the last 13 years, we've been meeting here every week to break down all the action in the wild, weird, and occasionally wonderful world of mixed martial arts. And Ben, we had UFC 317 over the weekend. It was a big one.
Yep.
Crowned a new lightweight champion. You got a flyweight champion who's creeping up on all-time greatness. You got several other notable happenings and fights. And so we're going to spend this episode of the podcast breaking down as much UFC 317 action as we can. We got some listener mail that we'll get to probably at the bottom of the hour. No reason, I don't think, to beat around the bush. We might as well just dive in. Ilia Topuria, he called his shot. He went out there and did exactly what he said he was going to do to Charles Oliveira, scoring that first round knockout, 2 minutes, 27 seconds into the first round. And you and I were traveling this weekend. We were out there in Seattle. We got to meet up with some of the longtime listeners, patrons in good standing of the co-main event podcast. And after we learned the results of this one, I said to you, something about this guy Topuria, something about him. And here he is, the 10th two-division champion in UFC history. I said Pantoja was knocking on the door of all-time greatness. It feels like Ilia Topuria is knocking on the door of being something incredibly special for the UFC that we have not seen in a number of years.
Yeah, especially because he has so many of those star quality kind of features, like just, presents himself well, looks like a polished professional athlete in and out of the cage, but then also has that special, one might call it confidence, some might call it hubris. Maybe it's only hubris if you lose, but showing up to a weigh-in day and telling the other guy, hey, I'm sorry for what's about to happen to you. I didn't want it. I mean, like he treats it as a given that whoever they put me up against for a lightweight title, I was going to knock him out. I didn't want it to be you, but that's how they said it had to be, brother. So I apologize. And just so you know, this one's already in the bag. And like to do that kind of shit, like not even do it like I'm trying to intimidate you or I'm trying to get in your head. The way we're normally used to MMA fighters doing that kind of stuff, seeming almost sorry that it has to be this way, taking no real joy and having to be the one to inform Charles Oliveira that he's on the verge of a knockout in a UFC title fight. Like that is just some next level shit that we're not used to.
He's a man of peace.
Well, to a point.
He chooses violence as the last possible recourse, and unfortunately, he just happens to be a professional fighter, and so that's what he does. But that's the way Ilia Topuria comes off. He's apologetic about the violence that he must wreak on you and your family,
and just in this case, very efficient violence.
Yeah.
As well.
I mean, hey man, he came out the week of the fight at the pre-fight press conference and elsewhere and said, I'm not going to have to chase this guy. He's going to come to me. That's what Charles does. He walks forward and he's going to be there where I need him to be. And I'm going to knock him out in the first round. And then you watch the fight and that is exactly what happened. And to the point where it did cross my mind, if you were Charles Oliveira and his team and you heard Ilia Topuria saying stuff like that, it seems like that might have been an opportunity for a game plan that maybe was different than the one we got out there. Although, so short, such a short fight, hard to really intuit what Charles Oliveira was going to do. And I guess if he was going to take Ben Fulks's coaching advice, you do you.
Yeah, a lot of you do you.
You got to go out there and be Charles Oliveira. At the same time, your strengths or your methodology for going about this fight did in fact seem to play into Ilia Topuria's strengths in the exact way that Ilia Topuria said they were going to, and you end up losing by first round knockout. This is just like kind of a masterful performance, because aside from getting his leg wrapped up in a grappling exchange for all of about 2 seconds in this fight, it looked like Ilia Topuria had it in the bag since the day before, just as he said he did.
Yeah, I mean, it is tough, I think, to criticize someone's game plan too much for a 2.5-minute fight, because most of the time you don't really game plan for a 2.5-minute fight. You're thinking a little bit longer than that. And this always happens too when we look at somebody where we think, hey, you'd be better off getting this dude to the ground. And if you get knocked out before you can get there, we go, see, I told you, shouldn't have been standing there with the guy.
Mhm.
Well, my man, they start standing without fail. These fights start standing. So you got to at least operate from that as a premise. And then you also, for reasons that we've seen, don't want to just go out there and think, I'm going to shoot immediately. Like, you need to at least make him think about other aspects of this game to open up the takedowns as a possibility for you. And so just because he didn't get to do all his stuff in 2.5 minutes doesn't mean that he didn't have other stuff that he was planning to do. It's a lot harder when you find yourself walking into punches. So Ilia Topuria really just went out there and smoked him. The size did not end up really having even a chance to be much of an issue for him. And I do think we get into some interesting stuff when you look at Ilia Topuria just showed up at lightweight, and already we seem to have some future plans for the guy. That some of them start to take shape immediately after this one is over.
Yeah.
But it's like, all right, another star is just kind of like falling in the UFC's lap here, and it's a question of what we'll actually do with it.
Yeah, there was a hot second at the beginning of this fight where they had exchanged some punches, and Charles Oliveira took what admittedly was a fairly ponderous takedown shot from too far out, but he did manage to muscle Ilia Topuria up against the fence. And there was a second where I was like, okay, here we are in the lightweight division. Maybe we're seeing some evidence at this point early on in this fight that the 155 pounders are going to be a little bit more of a difficult puzzle for Ilia Topuria than everyone seemed to be at 145. But when I knew we were in trouble was when Charles Oliveira tried to get him to the ground. Ilia Topuria winds up on top, first of all, passes the guard and gets this man in a crucifix position momentarily. That is when I was like, uh-oh, because this is the place we thought you were going to have the advantage, Charles. And in the fleeting times that this fight wound up in what we might have thought of as Charles Oliveira's world, Ilia Topuria handled him pretty well there too. And then immediately gets back up to the feet and, knocks him out cold, which is not a thing that we are used to seeing happen to Chucky Olives.
Let's remember that Ilia Topuria also fought grappling and submission specialist Bryce Mitchell and submitted him. Like, this guy, he's such a good striker that people forget that this guy can wrestle and grapple a little bit as well. I don't know. It seems like it's a gift to have a guy like this around, especially right now, because God damn it, you really need it. You really need a guy who can cut a nice figure in a suit, show up and tell everybody he's going to knock this dude out in the first round. At least so far, stay well away from any kind of major personal controversies or arrests, or even, know that I know of controversial political opinions that he can't wait to express to people. So it's just like he has all this stuff that you want a star fighter to have, and just sort of showing up, crafting his own run through the UFC as if it was preordained.
Yeah. One of the things that struck me to that end was just like the otherworldly calm that he displayed even after the fight was over, right? Barely any celebration at all from Ilia Topuria besides kind of walking around the cage. I believe he did the drink the tea, did a little bit like I'm drinking the tea type situation as if to say, I told you so. But other than that, I guess man just won the lightweight title. He became a 2-division champion in the UFC. And the celebration, at least in the cage from him, was way more yes, this is exactly what I thought was going to happen, then I am overjoyed to now having taken my place in the pantheon of great UFC champions. It was
Yeah,
just like,
it's not like falling to your knees in tears being like, "I can't believe the dream came true." It's
yeah.
like, "This is what I knew was gonna happen."
Now, another thing, you and I were talking over the weekend, and you referenced that the big homie Chuck Mindenhall had written a column last week. I think it was last week on the Uncrowned, where he said Conor McGregor's name is a swear word in MMA now. It's a curse word in that when you say it, people look to you as if you've violated the social construct.
Yeah. He
As if
said that
they've been like, was
you
that
say his
necessary?
name, and they look at you like it's ignorant to use that kinda
Yeah.
language.
We are at the dinner table, sir. Don't use language like that at the dinner table. So I don't mean to imply that he's really much that is comparable between Conor McGregor and Ilia Topuria, except that in the wake of this win, I kind of have early Conor vibes from this guy, but like in the cage. I mean, the things that he is accomplishing in terms of his actual fighting, we have no evidence yet to suggest that Ilia Topuria is an insane psychopath, and we hope that it stays that way. But the last guy that I feel like made us feel these feelings from watching a guy say what he was going to do and go out there and do it in the fights was Conor McGregor. And that's lofty praise, but it seems like Ilia Topuria is on the verge of being some kind of version of that sort of figure.
Yeah, it also, though, seems like he's doing it in a different era of the UFC, and that
True.
it's going to affect how all that plays out, you know? Like, because the UFC definitely seemed to come out of the Conor McGregor era feeling like, well, we put a crown on a dog's head, and then we couldn't tell it to sit and stay anymore, and we learned something coming out of that, and you know, for instance, what do you make of this stuff that happens after the fight where we get Paddy Pimblett in the cage there? And it seems like, all right, the pieces are sort of in place here for the next thing we're going to do with Ilia Topuria. I mean, Paddy definitely not like sitting at the very top of the rankings or
Yeah.
anything, but they have a personal history. Paddy's unbeaten in the UFC and it's coming in here like, you know, the popularity he has or like the fan base he's been able to develop seems beyond where his ranking is in the lightweight division. It's not like you have anybody who seems like, well, we absolutely gotta see this guy. I mean, Arman Sarukian probably deserves to be the number one contender. Nobody really cares about him though. He had his one chance. He kind of screwed that up. You also got like Justin Gaethje hanging around, but it wasn't that long ago we saw him face down asleep on the mat. So in that sort of obvious next step move, Paddy Pimblett can just sort of be like, hey, like just kind of walk up to the cage and be like, hey, partner, can I get it? Let me just slide by you. Let me just slip here. And then the next thing you know, he's in there. And Dana White was saying afterwards, he's like, if I had been there, I had already like gone back to my room. He said, if I had been there, that wouldn't have happened. And it's like, maybe that's why you should have been there. Maybe that's why you should have stayed for the end of your own show. But it made me go, does he not like it because Dana White acted like, hey, Ilia's family was in there in the cage, man. I don't like that kind of chaos like coming in there. And I was just like, I don't believe that you really care that much. What I think is that you don't like having your hands tied. You don't like other people getting to decide here's what the UFC is going to do next, because they did kind of set it up there. And that's usually a good thing, where we are using the current moment to tell this story about where things are going from here. Like, it's why the UFC always loves to advertise the next pay-per-view on the current pay-per-view. But it also seems like maybe Dana White just sitting around going like, no, I should make those decisions. These fighters should not make them among themselves, you know?
Dana White was there. He put the belt on Topuria.
Well, he said he wasn't there for the he said he had already gone back to his room, that maybe he had fulfilled his official duties there and then slipped out. That's how he made it sound.
Before they let Paddy Pimblett in the cage?
It's kind of how he made it sound.
Like he put the belt on Topuria and just pieced out immediately?
Just,
I don't know. There's photos on the internet right now of Ilia Topuria standing in the cage with 2 belts on his shoulders and Dana White in the background saying hi to Ilia Topuria's child.
And maybe he was saying bye to Ilia Topuria's child.
Maybe he was like, I got to run. I got to get back to my room. Well, that's an odd thing for Dana White to say.
Maybe he's got some screaming freedom energy drinks back there. He can't wait to crack open.
He didn't drink enough before the show, I guess, if he's got to head back to his room, tuck himself in. But to that end, it did seem like a pregnant decision to bring Paddy Pimblett into the cage. It was never going to be Arman, right? You understand why it can't be you, right, Arman?
We're not doing Arman.
But it could have been Gaethje. Gaethje was out there, standing there in the crowd. If you wanted to do, here's what I think the fork in the road is. If you wanted to do a fight that was going to get the hardcores fired up, Ilia Topuria versus Justin Gaethje would have done that for you. I think we all would be scared for Justin Gaethje, but we would show up to watch that. No complaints. We would be excited to watch those two dudes bang. Paddy Pimblett is a different kind of direction, a little bit. Paddy Pimblett is we're going to reach to the fringes of the bubble and maybe get outside of the bubble a little bit by putting our new shiny toy, Ilia Topuria, in there with a guy that we are at least led to believe is fairly popular or fairly notable, let's say, in Paddy Pimblett.
You were going to say notorious, and then you felt like...
I almost did. I almost did say notorious, and then I thought better of it. And that, I guess, is meaningful just from what you were saying about the UFC and from what we've been saying about the UFC over the last several years. That is, they feel like they learned a lesson from Conor McGregor and maybe some of their other efforts to prop people up as big stars. If anything, at this point, they seem apathetic about having big stars because, as we say time and time again on this show, they don't need them anymore. Most of their money is guaranteed in terms of how the UFC makes its money. It doesn't necessarily live and die off pay-per-view buys anymore. Sure, it is great when they can score a big one and sell a lot of pay-per-views. But just because of the guaranteed money, they put me and you out there. They'd make just as much money as they would off a standard UFC pay-per-view event. Get a better show too, as far as I'm concerned. But so the fact that they bring Paddy, of all people, in there, to me signals at least a willingness to try to do business with this guy, Ilia Topuria, that they now have in the pole position of being a big star.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good place to go next, I think, in part because we're all going to be kind of sitting around waiting to see what happens with Islam Makhachev, right? Like, he goes up to welterweight. Is he going to win a title and stay there? Is he going to lose and have to come back down? We don't know. There's a little bit of a holding pattern and a chance that you might still get a huge blockbuster matchup between Ilia Topuria and Islam Makhachev. In the meantime, though, you want to do something. And to go from this Charles Oliveira fight where Ilia Topuria is showing up being like, hey, I'm sorry. I really respect you, and I didn't want to have to beat you up. And then go into a Paddy Pimblett matchup, potentially, where you have Ilia Topuria saying, I would really, really enjoy beating him up. It gives you a different side of Ilia Topuria. It allows you to get into some different kind of stuff for him. And plus, like, Paddy's got some momentum at this point. Like, he already had like a weirdly strong fan base, even just like showing up in the UFC. And then after we just beat the brakes off of Michael Chandler, people then started to go like, all right, Paddy Pimblett might actually be good. He might actually be like still improving. And he does bring a certain kind of like vibe to the UFC that at least makes it interesting, makes like a potential title fight there seem like, okay, we're really doing something instead of just being like, all right, next man up, your turn, like that. I think you do a ton of really good business for the UFC. And if I'm Ilia, I'm thinking, man, by all means, give me the guy who is going to get the Barstool Sports fans to come in here and buy some of these pay-per-views that I'm getting points on. And also give me the guy who is still pretty goddamn hittable,
Yeah. I think they'll talk. I mean, those guys are going to talk a good game, right? Leading up to the fight. It will be an entertaining lead up. It'll be a fight people want to watch for sure. I could personally do with a little bit less of Ilia Topuria saying Paddy Pimblett is a pussy and he's going to put his balls on his forehead. But that's just me. That's just my sensibilities. So we'll see exactly how the lead up to that one goes, if that is indeed the direction that we end up going. Remember, you're listening to the Co-Main Event podcast proper. This show drops every Tuesday afternoon for free in your timelines and your podcast libraries. But if you want even more of the Co-Main Event, you can find Ben Folks and myself all week over on Patreon. Hit us up at patreon.com/co-main event. Get loads of extra audio and video content, as well as access to our official Discord message board where they're talking fights and a lot of other stuff literally all the time. And Ben, as I said, we were out there in Seattle this past weekend meeting up with a few of the homies, some of the patrons. Mm-hmm. So is that another perk? Is that a perk of the Patreon? Maybe you get the chance to pour a few soda pops back with you and me if we're hanging around, if we happen to be in the neighborhood of where you live.
I mean, I had a great time. I don't know about everybody else. I was out there, Chad, I don't have to tell you, zooted out in these streets. It's a lovely time. That's what you can count on from the CME faithful.
If you can think of other ways, if you want to, all right, let me do that again. If you want another way to support the podcast, a good way to do it is to go over to our merchandise shop over at comainevent.com, where we got hats, we got hoodies, we got lots more. You can stop by and pick up our best-selling Daddest Man on the Planet coffee mug while we can keep them in stock. We got t-shirts as well. We got Dundasso t-shirts. We got Bobby Nux t-shirts. We got Volcomania t-shirts. And yeah, you can get that Daddest Man on the Planet logo on a t-shirt as well. Just go to our website, comainevent.com, and click the link at the top of the page that says shop. As always, we partner with our guy, Johnny Ashcroft, on the shop. He's a graphic designer from Portland, Oregon, and we can't recommend him highly enough for all your design needs. Hit him up at studiosuperconductor.com or on Instagram at Studio Superconductor. And right now, like we always do about this time, let's do a little bit of listener mail.
Listener mail.
First piece of listener mail this week comes to us from the Big Bad Booty Daddy. He writes in to ask, what's our take on that Gregory Rodriguez KO of Jack Hermansson? This in the featured prelim of the night, right before we kicked off the main pay-per-view card. Gregory Rodriguez knocks out Jack Hermansson 4 minutes and 21 seconds into the first round, and this is one of the worst ones we've seen in a while. This was a bad knockout. Jack Hermansson spent a lot of time down in the cage. Eventually, we got word that he had been cleared by the UFC's doctors and sent off back to his room. But this was one where Gregory Rodriguez knocks this man down. You can see Herb Dean.
New Herb Dean running meme just dropped.
Mm-hmm. Getting out of the blocks maybe a little slower than he used to. And hey, man, as a couple gentlemen a certain age, we know what that's like.
Yeah.
We know what it's like not to have the explosive reaction time that you once did.
Yeah. It's the stopping and starting. That's just one of the first things to go. Got caught on the back foot a little bit there.
It's Herb Dean running in a slow motion action movie scene going, no.
Oh, well, Gregory Rodriguez calmly steps around the outstretched and already stiffening legs to walk up and deliver a final coffin nail hammer fist.
I feel like he took 3 steps, Gregory Rodriguez. He took 3 steps and then hammer fisted Jack Hermansson in the face. And hey, man, you got to keep fighting until the ref pulls you off. But this was unnecessary.
It was, and it's easy for us to stand here and say that. I never really blame the fighter in those situations, just because, like, how much shit would we give the guy if he tried to do a failed walk-off KO thing and the dude just sits up on you like the Undertaker?
That's what it would have been, though, too. It would have been Jack Hermansson coming back from the dead. at that point.
We've seen it happen though, where people think they hit that knockoff, that walk-off knockout, and like who was it with, like Jalen Turner and Renato Moicano, I think it was, at UFC 300, where I think it was like maybe even the first round in that one, where he lands a pretty good shot, drops Moicano in it, and then it's just sort of like taking a step back, thinking this one's over. Moicano gets up, comes back, and beats him. And that shit can happen, especially because it's like, if you're in that situation where you've got to be telling yourself, like, we got to get this dude all the way out of there, we got to seize any opportunity. Like, you don't want to be in a position where I'm throwing punches and then stepping back to see what happened, see which ones landed well. You drop that guy, the first thought on your mind is surely like, finish him, make sure this shit is over. And you step around there, Herb Dean hadn't got there yet, you go ahead and you hit him again. Like, I can't ever really blame a fighter for doing that, just because half your money is on the line there. Make sure you win that goddamn fight. Like, that's on Herb to get there.
I do agree with you, although I feel like Gregory Rodriguez could at least have glanced over at Herb Dean as if to say, you want to do something here, Herb?
You seeing this, Herb?
You want to maybe take some action here? I'll wait till you get here before I move forward. All right, next question this week comes to us from Darkwing Duck, who writes, pretty big night for prospects at UFC 317 with Jacoby Smith, Joshua Van, and Peyton Talbot all winning. Is there hope for the future?
Yeah, I mean, we never really hit, especially in some of these lighter weight classes, never really hit a concern that there wasn't talent coming up. There's talent. There's good fighters. And Peyton Talbot, I think, was a good one, because it seemed like everybody kind of looked at this one and went, oh, what are we doing here? Or did Peyton Talbot lose a fight that the UFC thought he should have won? And then they went, all right, screw this guy. He's not going to be anything. Jump him in there with somebody else who might be something. And then he comes back in here as a slight underdog, wins this one. Somebody had some money on him, and $20 from Ever Westy again. Had a pretty good night once again, just saying. But yeah, I mean, like, especially where you have some of these good young fighters and they're still improving. They're still getting better from one fight to the next. And so it's like, if you see a little bit of raw stuff in there, even if they get some of those holes exposed at some point, they're still young enough that they can fix them. They can come back the next time we see them a few months from now and be significantly better. Like, that's absolutely one of the exciting things about having the young fighters around.
I assume we will discuss Joshua Van a little bit more coming up in our discussion of the flyweight title fight. I will say Jacoby Smith goes out there on the early prelims. They said as he was coming to the cage as the biggest favorite in UFC history against Nico Price. He was minus like 2,700 or something crazy like that. And for the most part, he looked like it. He got the second round submission over Nico Price, although there were a few moments when Nico Price seemed on the verge of forcing him into a Nico Price fight. It just didn't play out that way in the end.
Yeah, of the bets that I won, one of them was not my $2 flyer on the plus 1,100 odds they were giving out on Nico Price.
Yeah, that did not pay out for you. And I agree, Jacoby Smith, talented wrestler. He's got a high level wrestling background, wrestled at Oklahoma State University, so he's a favorite of Daniel Cormier. And he's a guy with a lot of punching power. He seems like he's trying to have an exciting fighting style. He's at welterweight, and he looked good to me, man. I'm excited to see what they do next with that guy. Next question this week comes to us from, let's see here, Conor Lewandowski, who writes, it occurred to me this week that with John Jones being stripped of the belt, it is the first time ever there is no male American UFC champion. The first time ever. Is this the decline of UFC or USA wrestling? The tough former linebacker turned knockout artist? Or has everyone else caught up? I'm inclined to say maybe it's just a moment in time. Like I don't know that it's incredibly meaningful at this point that there's not a male UFC champion, especially since, if you're trying to make like a commentary on competitiveness, it's not like the male heavyweight champion was not competitive in terms of the actual fighting. He was not competitive in that he did not want to do it.
Yeah.
And so we took the belt away from him in the end. There's still great American fighters out there. We will have male American UFC champions again. It's just, I think, a moment in time that we don't have one at the moment. Now, are there a lot of fighters coming from elsewhere more and more all the time as the tendrils of this thing creep throughout the world, especially into areas and nations where there are socioeconomic environments that forge professional fighters? Yeah, of course there are. That's happening. And so you have an even more international flavor to a sport that always had an international flavor. So I don't think it's a coincidence that you have a very international group of UFC champions at this moment. But I also don't think that it's a sign that America is done. I think we still got people.
First of all, the disrespect toward American citizen Merab Balashvili. He's a citizen. That means he can fight. He can fuck you up, and they can't deport him.
Well,
yeah.
Let's not get too comfortable over there, Merab.
As we've learned, we are currently trying to stretch the qualifications for deportation. But okay. There is only one American champion at all, and it's Kayla Harrison at this point. But it also has something to do with just at this point, you're getting fighters from so many different places in the world that if it's just USA versus the world, stands to reason that sometimes the world is going to be winning. You just have some people from all over. It's not like where, you look up one day and Brazilians have all the belts. It's like people coming from a variety of places. So like, I think it makes some degree of sense. And yeah, I don't see like the idea that we have had in our minds where, as we've said before, a lot of people, especially Americans who wind up in MMA, they try to do something else first. Like they came from some other world, some other career, and usually another aspect of professional sports did not work out. And so they ended up in MMA. Even the ones where we've had where it's like they came through college wrestling programs and then kind of topped out in that sport and look what it could offer you professionally. And so then they went to MMA. And you're getting people from other regions where it was just basically like, whether they were calling it that or not, MMA was the thing that they were doing since they were kids, kind of. So I don't know, to some degree, maybe it just makes sense.
Next question this week comes to us from Dutch football coach, and if I may editorialize a little bit, handsome man, Robin Van Persie, who writes in to say, okay, hear me out. What if distracted daddy Dana saw all the stir around El Matador? Did you notice they went there announcing him as El Matador?
He said beforehand that that's what he was going to go with for this. Also, I find it interesting that his coaching is what you think that Robin Van Persie is known for in the soccer world.
Is that not right? Because I had to Google him to find out who he was, and it says football coach at the top. So is that you telling me there's something else I need to know about?
Well, he's a coach the same way Deion Sanders is a coach.
Oh,
you know
okay.
What I'm saying?
So like former great player? Is that what we're okay?
Yeah, had himself some pretty good seasons.
Anything? Is that it? You don't want to add anything? That's all. That's.
If you want me to get into the specifics, that's where my knowledge gets hazy. Think you played for
Arsenal? Don't try to pretend like you're schooling me, like you're correcting me on a fact. You rolled in here like, is that what you think he's famous for? And then it turns out you don't know anything about this guy.
He played in the Premier League. Yeah, he played for Manchester United, but also like mainly for Arsenal. Scored a bunch of goals for Arsenal and shit. So there you go.
High cheekbones, great hair. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, Dana White sees El Matador going up and finally decides we need more champs. UFC creates 15 divisions, 125 through 175 every 5 pounds, and then 185, 195, 205, and 205 plus. Isn't this perfect for the sport and the UFC? Every pay-per-view, a belt on the poster, every 3 months, a new champ versus champ match. And if you would humor me, who will be the 15 champs at the end of 2025?
Nope,
Okay, no,
not going to humor you for that.
we're not humoring you on that end, but I mean, we have long talked about how the divisions should probably be 155, 165, 175, 185, probably. But you got a better chance of seeing Jesus Christ himself come back from the dead than the UFC wanting to go out here and add a ton new weight classes for a bunch of different reasons.
Yeah, they're not doing that. I mean,
not the least of which is that the specter, the fear has always been that we get into a boxing situation where you got so many champs at so many different weight classes that nobody really even knows who they are. It ends up muddying the waters more than anything else. I think there's a case to be made that maybe there should be a couple more divisions, mostly for competitive reasons, not necessarily for we need to put belts on the poster reasons. But 15 is too many. 15 is you start to devalue the already somewhat devalued titles, I think, if you get to having that many champions.
I also think like the closer the weight classes are, the more movement you would see of fighters going between them. Especially it's like, yeah, you're trying this weight class, you lose one or two, you go to this one, maybe you could start over again. I think you would see a lot more of that. And then I think that people would get confused. It's like right now, I feel like a lot of even like semi-casual or like on the bubble between casual and hardcore fans, you could go to them and be like, what weight class is Dan Hooker in? And they know, and you might lose some of that. I also think that whether or not they should do it, whether or not it would play to what they want to do overall, the big resistance to the UFC would be that they just don't want to change anything right now. Like they feel like they've got the formula. Dana White, the older he gets, the stodgier he gets, the less welcome to change and new ideas he is. I think that they just, at this point, they're doing it this way because they have done it this way. And that's all there is to it.
In addition to that, I mean, obviously we know the UFC holds tremendous sway over all the state athletic commissions and whatnot, but you can't just go add a bunch of weight classes yourself.
Yeah, you could. You could tell them that that's what you're doing and they would go along with it.
You would have to, though. You would have to tell them and they would have to adopt that. Not that that might be a problem for the UFC at this point, because as I said, tremendous sway, but it's another hoop you got to jump through.
Yeah.
You can't just show up and have 15 belts on the table. All right. Next question this week comes to us from Conor Walsh, who writes, does Tom defending the interim title versus Blades count towards total defenses for the record? Of course, he means the heavyweight title defense record. I don't know. My guess is probably not, but should it? I think so, because we need to put as much pressure on John Jones coming back to this sport as we can to fight Tom Aspinall. And the sooner we get to the stage of proclaiming that Tom Aspinall is on the doorstep of being the greatest UFC heavyweight champion of all time, the sooner we are to John Jones waking up in the middle of the night with his rabbit ears standing up on end going, what'd they say? Deciding that he suddenly needs to unretire and return to fight Tom Aspinall. So I'm saying, yes, let's count it.
You're saying yes, but you're making clear that it's not necessarily because you believe in it. It's a means to an end.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, for me, even the fact that we're asking the question highlights how fucking stupid it was in the first place to have a guy defend an interim title. You know why we don't know how that factors into total title defenses? Because you don't do that. You don't defend the interim title. That's just not what it's there for. So it was a stupid place to put us into in the beginning. But yeah, I guess, I mean, if you're going to say, especially if you're the UFC, you'd be like, hey, this is a real title until the other one comes back. And if the guy got title shit, like if he got points on the pay-per-view for defending an interim title, if he got all the rights and honors of a UFC champion, then yeah, I guess you got to treat it like it was a real title defense.
Last question this week comes to us from Jeff, aka Goldberg_ebooks from our Discord over on Patreon. He writes, I've been following the sport and the 125-pound division for a while, even when it was mostly relegated to Japan and the Tachi Palace Casino. Is Pantoja Van potentially the most marketable flyweight title fight ever? Joshua Van is 23. Soon to be 24-year-old super prospect who looks better in each fight and has a compelling backstory as a Burmese immigrant fighting for a better life for his family. Pantoja is the second best flyweight champion we've ever seen and seems to get more dangerous with age. The last time I was this jazzed for a 125-pound title fight was Cejudo versus Dillashaw. Am I just a hopeless romantic about this fight, or does the UFC really have a unique opportunity to put their promotional muscle behind this one and get people excited about the 125-pound division? Love you both equally. We will talk about that coming up right after this. Well, man, Alexander Pantoja pretty much put a whooping on Kai Kara France over the weekend, pretty much ran him right over. Very lopsided first round, somewhat more competitive second round, still won by the champion, and then a third round that saw Pantoja get to his favorite position on the back with the body triangle, lock up the rear naked choke, and despite a desperate attempt by Kai Kara France to get out of it, he ends up tapping out a minute and 55 seconds into that third round. And, you know, coming into this pay-per-view, obviously all of the attention was being heaped on Ilia Topuria and Charles Oliveira. That was the one we were very excited about. You and I commented about it last week over on the Discord. It didn't seem like anybody was talking about Pantoja versus Kara France, and I think for obvious reasons. But after this thing was over, I feel like we at least need to come out and say out loud, put some respect on Alexander Pantoja's name, because he is, in fact, a dominant and at this point fairly long reigning UFC flyweight champion. This guy is just really, really, really good, and he does in fact seem to get better as his march as champion goes on.
Yeah, he's also one of those guys where if I were in somebody's corner getting ready to fight this dude and we're trying to look for weaknesses, we're trying to look for areas where we have the advantage, I mean, I'm still gonna probably tell him you do you, but I don't have a whole lot of other useful advice beyond that, except that, like, hey, he can't win them all. You know, the law of averages is gonna catch up to the guy eventually, and maybe it's tonight. You know, like that's about as good as I could do.
I would say, just from my position as an MMA coaching expert, don't let him choke you.
Okay.
That's what I would. First things first, don't let him choke you.
Keep this motherfucker off your back.
Yeah. Don't let him get his arm around your neck, is what I would say.
Okay. That's not bad advice at all. So, like, yeah, I give that. That's really the question kind of about, like, hey, do we have something here with the flyweights? And the answer is, like, well, yeah, but we've had something with flyweights before. Like, the issue is not that we don't have good fighters. Like, you probably just across the board have better, like a whole better entire crop at flyweight than you do at any one division anywhere else in the UFC. Like, kind of because, like, there's no room for anybody at flyweight who is not already really fucking good. And the idea, like, okay, do you finally have, like, good stories to tell at flyweight? I've had good stories before. It just, yeah, it hasn't really broken through for people. Some of that may be that the UFC sort of already has, like, a defeatist attitude about flyweight. Some of it may be that just that's the point where even fans who really appreciate all kinds of different skill are like, okay, but they're little guys. They're just too little guys. Like, I don't know what it is, but it's not like I agree with the point that Goldberg ebooks is making, where you're like, hey, you got a good fight coming up here. You kind of set the stage for it. Pantoja, Joshua Van. I mean, It will be interesting. Like, does the UFC lovers of the Trump regime, do they suddenly embrace an immigrant story? Because it doesn't seem like they love the idea of. Doesn't seem like their political interests love the idea of immigrants coming to this country for a better life. That's because we're kind of in the round them all up and put them in cages surrounded by alligators mode in the United States of America. So it'll be interesting if they still want to play that as a storyline they can promote. But it's like, yeah, you have a great story, you have a great fight, it got all set up here on the same night. Does it really make a dent though? Like, does it bring flyweight to a different level of like interest and awareness among the core of the fan base? I don't know. It's hard for me kind of to be like, how is this one going to be the thing that finally gets it over the hump, you know?
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything that gets flyweight over the hump with the casual fan at this point, right? Like, we could have done it with Demetrius Johnson maybe if we had really, really, really tried. Maybe we had a moment in time where it could have been Henry Cejudo if we really, really tried. Brandon Moreno, very likable guy, is a multi-time champ in that division, and it just feels like the wider audience has failed to latch on, which is a shame because we always talk about, as you said, a lot of talent in the weight class and very exciting fights, as we saw over the weekend. You know, Joshua Van and Brandon Royval was the fight of the night. Pantoja and Kai Kara France, while being pretty lopsided in favor of the champion, was not a boring fight by any stretch of the imagination. And so they got good fighters. You get good fights. It's an exciting division, but it seems like it is kind of always going to be one for the hardcores at this point, unless something really, really notable and unforeseen is able to change about flyweight, which is that's a shame. But do I think Alexander Pantoja versus Joshua Van is a good title matchup and might be more interesting than some of the stuff we've had as of late and could be a fun fight and a potentially marketable fight? Yeah, I do. And you know, Joshua Van's story is very inspiring and interesting at this point, even, you know, to the point that he's fought 3 times in 2025, the first half of 2025. He fought Bruno Gustavo da Silva in June last month, June 7th, and then turns around, steps in on short notice for Manel Cape against Brandon Royval, ends up winning that one. And this is potentially the biggest leap up the UFC rankings that I have ever seen, because Joshua Van has climbed 11 spots from number 11 to number 1 in the flyweight rankings, and was basically just like crowned the number 1 contender over the weekend, beat the previous number 1 contender in Brandon Royval, and immediately they're just like, get this guy up here in the cage because he's next for the champion.
Here's my idea for how you can make it work for the hardcore or the non-hardcore general sports fan base. For one thing, stop any mention of how small they are physically. Well, first of all, let's change the name of the weight class. We're not calling it flyweight anymore. We're calling it action weight, because there's a lot of action in this division, Chad. Also, we're not going to mention like what they weighed in at. We'll just be like, he made the action weight limit on Friday, fight to go, or this guy has sometimes struggled making the action weight limit. That came over 1 or 2 pounds over the action weight limit in the past. So we'll just like not remind anybody. We'll not go out of our way to remind anybody how small they are. Also, for these fights, we will get smaller refs.
Only low angle camera shots. Smaller refs, smaller cage. Let's get mini water bottles for people to hold while they're in
Only
the
Joe
corner.
Rogan is allowed to come in and interview them, because then he will not tower over them. But yeah, the refs 5'3" or smaller, and we'll just hope that people don't get to see them next to other human beings often enough to kind of put it all in perspective. I think it could work.
Kind of like we're going to do sort of like a Tom Cruise kind of a situation where it's like, as long as you don't see Tom Cruise in person, maybe you will not figure out how old and short he is.
Yeah, if they can make Tom Cruise out here as Jack Reacher, then we can make the flyweights look like at least welterweights.
I like that. You know what? I do not hate that idea at all. I think that's perhaps we finally hit on the answer. The key to success is lying about the flyweights.
Just more lives improved by CME Industries LLC, our consultancy firm that we're still waiting on the Venmo money to roll in on that, because we've handed out so many good ideas over the years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I can't wait for our presentation at the UFC headquarters when we roll in with an easel and a bunch of big cards on it that have like pictures of tiny water bottles.
We should write a rap song to go with
it. A picture of Pantoja holding a regulation water bottle and then a picture of him holding a tiny water bottle to be like, see what we did? See what we did? We made him bigger.
We made him a star is what we did.
Yeah. Let's start thinking big about the flyweight division. What do you think? Just use that as sort of a pitch, elevator pitch.
It can be like in the hook of the rap song that we write.
You know, we are not going to get out of here without talking about Sean Strickland storming into the cage. Is that Fury FC? Something like that.
It's tough enough. It was a tough enough thing in Vegas.
Tough enough. Gets taunted by a fighter who defeated an Extreme Couture guy. Taunted pretty explicitly, let's say. Well,
it was a DX crush job. That's kind of a classic.
It was also, he turned around and was like, fuck you to those guys. If I'm an able enough lip reader, and then did all of the DX crotch chop kind of thing. Chris Curtis and Sean Strickland storm into the cage to air their grievances with this guy. And Sean Strickland comes out banging. So I don't know if you want to say banging with Sean Strickland, but he comes out swinging, throwing punches. And like I said to you over the weekend, nobody in MMA is more of a loose cannon, devil may care guy than Sean Strickland outside the cage in his regular life, and more of a calculating, careful, strategic professional than Sean Strickland.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I was talking about this with Pizzi, and he did note that Sean Strickland's weirdo, I'm wearing my flip-flops while trying to engage in violence walk as he comes in the cage. Or it's just like, you shouldn't have worn your flip-flops to the MMA fight, bro. Because now you're in there, you got to walk over there and punch somebody, but also you're walking like you're trying not to lose your shoes. So that's hilarious. But like, this is very much the Sean Strickland MO at this point. As long as it's not his fight that he's supposed to be in, it's not as he's not getting paid to bring out the violent savagery he is always promising, then sure, he's down to throw them bows, but it's when he has the most to actually personally gain from being that person that he is a completely different person. So I think that honestly, the dude who he went in there and took a swing at handled it perfectly. Did you see him? He was on Mike Heck's show talking to him, where he was like explaining kind of what happened. He's like, they're talking shit to me, so of course when I win, I'm gonna talk some shit back. And then he was like, I don't want anything to happen to those guys. Like, I'm a fan of those guys. So like, no, like, it is no big deal. They came in there, threw some punches. I wasn't hurt. So no biggie as far as he's concerned. You're like, well, that is the way to be about it. If you want to gain some MMA fans, win a fight, hit Sean Strickland with the DX crotch chop, and then be kind of boys will be boys about the post-fight melee.
It's all in the game, man. It's all in the game. All right, that's going to do it this week for the Co-Main Event podcast. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We appreciate the support. Won't you join us over on Patreon for the rest of the week? We got tomorrow, Wednesday.
Rest of the week might be optimistic. It's the 4th of July week, but we'll do a live chat tomorrow.
Okay, you're right. It is the holiday week. We got the live chat tomorrow, and maybe we're on notice for the rest of the week. I don't know.
You're on notice not to fucking bother me.
Duly noted. I guess Ben Folks says don't join till next week. If you want to, it's over at patreon.com/co-main event. If you don't, we'll see you back here next week, as long as Ben Folks can squeeze it into his holiday partying schedule. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We appreciate the support. As for right now, we're done. You got some big celebration plans? Celebrating America over there?
I'm gonna go gallivanting out in the woods, celebrate the 4th of July. Do you know it's Canada Day today?
I do know that. Yeah.
They always just got to get in a little bit before us with their shit. You know that?
Oh, you're
They
not
have
doing this. Don't pile on our friends from up north.
No, I got love for the Canadians, but they always just beat us to it, man. They do their Thanksgiving in October. They're going to do their day a few days before our day. It's just they're ruining our special night,
No, they're just getting in first, man. Be first. That's what Canada's doing. That says more about us than it does about them. We need to get off our ass.
It's a good strategy. I can't hate.